Hi everyone, welcome to Sustainable Edge, a podcast produced by Position Green. I'm Joachim Nahem, Executive Chairman at Position Green and your host for this podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Hugo Munthe-Kaas, Head of Compliance and Risk at DLA Piper in Oslo. DLA Piper is a renowned global law firm with more than 4,000 lawyers in over 40 countries across America, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Asia Pacific. They assist with corporate law, legal services for national and international companies, organizations, and public administration. DLA Piper is also a co-organizer of this year's ESG 100 report and launch event, making their insights invaluable. Welcome to our podcast, Hugo. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's excellent to be here. Thank you.
So tell me, Hugo, what does ESG mean for a law firm like DLA Piper?
Yes, that's a big question. Of course, DLA Piper is a large global international law firm, and we have embarked on our own ESG journey, of course, like many of our peers. And what we've been doing is, of course, assessing how we can contribute in a sustainable manner, but it also means that we're constantly trying to look at how we can assist our clients in achieving their sustainability goals, and also in complying with the many regulations that are coming up within the ESG sphere.
So it's both a business opportunity for you in terms of helping your clients, for them to sort of adapt, and at the same time it means also requirements or expectations to you as a big firm as well.
Absolutely, it's even more than a business opportunity. I would say our assessment is that it's bigger than that. Internally we've made a materiality assessment where we have identified the issues and themes that we want to work with internally. And of course, like our peers, we have progressed more within some fields than others. For some areas, we have measurable goals and things like that.
And what are some of those? Like, what is material for DLA?
We have a net zero plan, and also within some other areas we have that. But then in others, we're still assessing our performance, to be honest, and trying to figure out how to get better. And we've published a report, the DLA Piper ESG report, sustainability report, and it's published on our webpage, and it's possible to read it. It's quite detailed,
well, you are a law firm, so I'm sure there are a lot of details, and there may be some footnotes.
There's even an executive summary if you don't want to read the whole report. But it's at least from a law firm point of view, it might be interesting to have a look, because we've done quite a bit of work. But that's the internal part. To be honest, I think one of the big things that we have had to work with and look at this period of change is really how ESG is affecting our clients and their business on a much broader scale, because the way we see it, the ESG changes that are happening now on the regulatory side is systematic. So it's a very broad change affecting very much of business and most of our clients, if not all.
So it's not just like a GDPR compliance, it's actually a systematic challenge that may have to sort of challenge the way they do business.
Absolutely, and it challenges the way that we advise our clients, and so it's moving. ESG is moving from what can be said to be a voluntary space to what's mandatory. And within a law firm, we've gone from ESG being or ESG topics being maybe a more specialized field, niche, to it becoming important for most of the advice we provide. And so we have to understand our role and how we can assist our clients. And it's important that we understand how ESG is affecting the business of our clients, and that's often an assessment that must be made on a case-to-case basis, because how ESG affects a company is different from sector to sector, company to company, and jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
But can you give us some examples, sort of not disclosing a particular client, but sort of what this journey that you embark on with your clients, where they face these challenges from a regulatory perspective, from a sort of business model, are they going to be able to still sell their products and services in a green transition where both it's regulated, but also other businesses and consumers have different expectations? Take us through an example of how you've been part of this journey.
I think that's one of the challenges with ESG as well, that it's so broad and it comprehends so many things. If you go back a couple of years, ESG was something that some discussed, and now it is the topic of most boards and companies everywhere, because it's affecting everyone. I could give examples of companies, but really it's all about companies being exposed to new types of regulations concerning sustainability, human rights, working conditions, and then have to adapt to that. And it's quite broad, I would say.
But do you feel that your clients are prepared for this? I mean, it sounds like it's, as you said, it's broad and sometimes very specific. For example, on human rights, the Norwegian transparency law, or for that matter, new human rights laws coming in Germany, Australia, Canada, etc. They're also quite specific, and in some cases, as you said, they're broad. They're across a large number of ESG factors. Are they generally prepared? The companies you work with, the boards. Tell us a little bit about sort of what does it look like?
My impression is that companies want to comply. I mean, they want to get on board with this, and they are working very hard to comply as well. But of course, there is a growing recognition, I think, among many companies that more resources will have to be spent in this area going forward. And of course, that's also a result of ESG regulations have been with us for a long time, but what's happened after the European Green Deal and other initiatives is that you've had an upburst of sustainability regulations all over. The EU has been in the forefront, of course, but it's not only the EU. I mean, the regulations are coming all over the world. And also the regulations are often maybe a bit vague sometimes, and they're often subject to change. They evolve quite fast, and this is a challenge for maybe especially for everyone, but also especially for international companies that are exposed to many jurisdictions. I think I read that in 75 of the biggest or bigger countries in the world, there are about 300 reporting or above 300 disclosure requirements for companies, and all these requirements they have different thresholds for when you need to report, what you need to report, how you should report, so
it almost becomes like a tax compliance issue, or meaning that you sort of have to be compliant in multiple jurisdictions, and in many cases with unclear regulatory requirements.
Sometimes,
especially.
Yes, I don't want to seem too negative, but it is also a factor that we need to remember, and I think that's also one of the main challenges because I mean these regulations, they are there to create a better world. So I mean that's good. And then it's just to also have in mind that when there are a lot of regulations coming up all over the place, someone needs to comply with them, and that is also a challenge. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a few of these regulations, in particular from the EU. You mentioned CSRD, under CSRD, there is the ESRS, and this is on the corporate side. Then you have for the finance sector or for financial market players, what's called SFDR. And then there are even more acronyms like on human rights. And, of all of these, and we're already familiar with the taxonomy, or many are familiar with the taxonomy, which is in many ways perhaps you can say the most ambitious regulation, because it's actually challenging the business models of companies in terms of how much of their revenue is green or can be classified as green according to EU criteria. But of all of these regulations, and there are still some in the pipeline, and there sure are more to come, which one do you think will have the biggest impact in perhaps particularly the Scandinavian market, which is for the most part integrated into the larger European market, but also global, as you said. A lot of Scandinavian companies do business globally. Which of these regulations do you think will actually have the greatest impact?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, of course, but I honestly, I think that it is the supply chain due diligence regulations that's going to have the most impact, but not only on Scandinavian companies, but actually internationally, yes.
Yeah, because supply chains are famously complex and global.
Yes, and it's we've seen that already in Norway with the Transparency Act, but then you have also in the EU, as you mentioned, that we have the the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, CSDD, which what that requires of companies that are in scope is that they have to do a due diligence on their supply chain to identify environmental and human rights and working condition risks in their supply chain, and then not just report about that, but also mitigate and do something about the issues that you identify. And from a government point of view, I mean, it's understandable with that type of regulation. I mean, you see that there are a lot of global issues and problems, and you want to do something about that. But the legislators are often limited by the jurisdiction of the countries they govern, right? But one way of solving that issue is, of course, telling the companies in your jurisdiction to implement certain standards in their supply chains, and suddenly you have global reach as a legislator. And of course, this is something we also saw a little bit in relation to sanctions, when the US focused on the banks and said that all banks need to follow US sanctions.
Global repercussions.
And then they follow up internationally with all customers, and then suddenly you're implementing US sanction policy globally. So it's very effective. And a smart way of doing it to implement change.
So you're saying effectively the EU can actually help set a global standard, even though it is legally is limited to their jurisdiction, but because so many do business through European entities, it could potentially be a new global standard.
And it's not just the EU. I mean, the CSDD is sort of the tip of the iceberg. I mean, these types of regulations, like in Norway with the Transparency Act, which is quite similar, and we already have it. I mean, these types of regulations are coming up in other jurisdictions as well.
But why do we need single jurisdiction laws in Europe if we were going to have a regional and potentially a global one? So, you mentioned Norway, but Germany has Switzerland, and, for all intents and purposes, Switzerland and Norway for this are integrated into the EU law. So doesn't it just become a little bit of a paper exercise, or just extra unnecessary compliance?
It's not unnecessary compliance. I don't think that. But what concerns me is, of course, that when you have so many regimes that are maybe trying to achieve the same thing, you're doing it maybe more complicated than it has to be. But that's, of course, the challenge with international cooperation on these topics, and everyone wants to sort of get moving, and get this on the road. So it's partly understandable as well. But the paper, I don't think that this due diligence regulation especially will not be a paper exercise, because you are writing about, it's only a paper exercise if no one reads it. to be honest. I mean, and I think that the reports that are going to be disclosed in relation to, especially these due diligence, supply chain due diligence regulations, are reports that will be read. They will concern topics that are discussed as we speak, and there will be NGOs and stakeholders and shareholders and activists and others, and they will read the report, and they will act and react to what's in the reports. And also because the reports are not, these due diligence reports are not just numbers. They're actually assessments and based on investigations that have been done on a more individual basis. There's going to be more room for discussion as well. And that's why I don't think these will be paper exercises
Interesting.
At all.
Well, it's at least reassuring to someone like us at Position Green, I'm sure to you as well, who spends a lot of time on helping produce reports and companies to disclose that somebody's actually going to be reading this. And obviously with this being, as you said, moving from voluntary to mandatory. Mandatory also means that non-compliance can be sanctioned. And we've already seen some examples. For example, in Germany, there was a, now I would say almost famously, police raid on a investment bank for selling what were allegedly not green products, or they'd sort of labeled them as green. And it was sort of the type of police raid you usually associate with tax evasion or corruption or something very serious. But this was basically greenwashing. What other examples we've seen or you expect to see of authorities clamping down on non-compliance for sustainability reporting or false disclosures?
Oh yes, I think this is an important topic and also an important driving factor for many companies' sustainability work as well. I mean, one is the regulatory side, of course, but then it's enforcement of that, and also the focus that other groups in society will have on what's being written. And we've seen examples of that, court cases regarding greenwashing, for example, or companies not providing accurate information or correct information about their sustainability work, and then later on that information being challenged, which brings us back to why I think in these reports people will actually read these reports, right. and you will see action.
Well, I guess we also have examples of not following sustainability practices. I know you do a fair amount of work in shipping. We've seen court cases now of essentially what are violations of for ship recycling, either by national law and sure. I believe also that recently there was a good chance that this Hong Kong Convention, as is called, will be enter into force. So you're seeing also in industries that there is a sustainability standard, and not following that can have legal repercussions.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Now, also, we were discussing a little bit before the podcast here, the case of Fosen in Norway, which is a onshore wind park, which has almost gotten international attention. Very complex case about human rights, a violation of human rights when it comes to the rights of the indigenous people in Norway, the Sami, and that the concession for this wind park did not adequately take into consideration their rights and interests in this process. Do you think what's the sort of correlation between that and everything we're seeing now on sustainability regulation in terms of state, government, specific human rights issues, but also part of the green transition, that this wind farm, the intention is good. It's to produce more renewable energy. Do you think we're going to see more cases like this?
Yes, I'm not. I cannot comment on that matter specifically, but it's an example, definitely, of the type of situations that will come up more and more often going forward, for sure. And it has it's also an example of how we going forward will have a greater focus on supply chain and due diligence, and And we see that it's a discussion that also engages the public, and which again brings us back to why I believe the reports will be read with another way than how we maybe have been reading financial reports, to put it that way, previously. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Hugo, let me ask you a completely different question. We've spoken about your profession, your role as a lawyer, the role of DLA as a global law firm, and what's happening in especially the regulatory space on sustainability. But what does sustainability mean to you at a personal level?
At a personal level, well, I bike to work every day. Yeah, so that's so. I mean, I do. I suppose I have some things that I do and my family do that are that sort of takes sustainability into account, but.
And
I'm
helps
sure
reduce the scope 3 of DLA Piper,
of course.
Although maybe marginally,
yes,
but still,
true.
It is a contribution.
Absolutely. But I'm sure I could have done a lot more. Absolutely. I think one of the challenges, for me at least, has been having information about what I can do or we can do in order to be more sustainable, but also in a effective manner or rational manner. What is the rational thing to sort of prioritize? And I think that's, at least for my part, it's not having information that I know is reliable and organized, and by that it's difficult to make the right choices, I think.
In some cases, we want somebody to make the choices for us.
Yes, of course.
It's so challenging to know what to do.
Absolutely, and that also brings us back to the purpose behind many of the rules that we've been talking about now is, of course, to get more information to the public and to in order to make them. Make it possible to make the right choices. Right. And
so sustainability, transparency will lead to more accountability. It's easier to hold.
Accountability, and also maybe, we can hope that it will also make it possible to make better choices.
Informed
and I think that's informed decision. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hugo, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Thank you again for listening, and see you soon.